the foundation of emotional freedom. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning knowing that nothing anyone says or does can shake you. Not the driver who cuts you off on the highway. Not your supervisor when they question your decisions. Not even your closest family members when they push those buttons they installed years ago. What if I told you this isn't fantasy, but a skill you can actually develop? Here's the truth most people never discover. Emotional chaos isn't caused by difficult people. It's caused by the invisible patterns running in your own mind. Right now, as you're reading this, your brain is operating on autopilot, reacting to triggers that were programmed into you years ago. And here's what's wild. Those same reactions that feel so automatic, so inevitable, so justified, they're actually optional. By the time you finish this journey with me, you'll possess a complete framework for maintaining emotional equilibrium in any situation. You'll understand why intelligent, capable people still lose their composure over minor inconveniences. And you'll have the precise, actionable strategies to remain centered, clear-headed, and in complete control, regardless of what anyone throws your way. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how some people seem untouchable? Not cold or distant, but genuinely unaffected by the chaos around them? They're not lucky. They're not special. They simply understand something about human psychology that most people miss entirely. And once you see what they see, you can't unsee it. Chapter 1. The Hidden Triggers That Control You. Most people believe their emotional reactions are straightforward. Someone disrespects them, so naturally they feel angry. Their supervisor criticizes them, so obviously they feel defensive. A friend cancels plans last minute, so understandably they feel hurt. This cause and effect thinking feels logical, but it's actually where everything goes wrong. Your emotions aren't controlled by external events. They're controlled by 3 invisible patterns that operate beneath your conscious awareness. These patterns act like hidden software running in the background of your mind, determining your reactions before you even realize you're reacting. And until you identify these patterns in yourself, you'll remain their prisoner. The first pattern is the personalization spiral. This is when your brain automatically interprets other people's actions as deliberate statements about your worth. A teammate doesn't reply to your message quickly, and suddenly your mind creates an entire narrative. They're avoiding you. They don't value your input. They're probably complaining about you to others. None of this might be true, but your brain treats it as fact. Here's what actually happens in that moment. Someone merges into your lane without signaling on your morning commute. Within milliseconds, before you consciously process what happened, your brain has already decided. This person saw you, deliberately chose to disrespect you, and thinks their time is more valuable than yours. But here's the reality. That driver was probably completely unaware of your existence. They were thinking about their sick child at home, or the presentation they're late for, or the argument they had with their partner that morning. Their action had absolutely nothing to do with you. The personalization spiral is exhausting because it makes you the center of everyone else's universe. You become a radar constantly scanning for evidence that people are trying to hurt, dismiss, or undermine you. And when your brain is searching for attacks, It manufactures them everywhere. Your teammate was actually overwhelmed with 3 urgent deadlines when your message arrived. Your supervisor's critical tone was residual stress from their own boss pressuring them. That friend who canceled, their elderly parent just called with a health scare. When you're caught in the personalization spiral, you're essentially handing every single person you encounter a remote control to your emotional state. You're making their behavior, which is almost always about them, into evidence about you. The second pattern is the expectation fortress. You've built rigid mental structures about how reality should operate. People should arrive on time. Colleagues should communicate clearly. Family members should understand your needs without you having to explain them. Service workers should be efficient and pleasant. And when reality doesn't conform to these structures, you suffer. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Your expectations are not universal laws. They're personal preferences dressed up as moral imperatives. Think about this. If you expect every person you meet to be considerate and respectful, you're setting yourself up for continuous disappointment. Some people are navigating their own struggles that temporarily override their social awareness. Some people were never taught different. Some people are operating from completely different cultural frameworks where directness is valued over politeness or efficiency over warmth. The expectation fortress becomes particularly destructive in close relationships. You expect your partner to remember what you said last Tuesday. You expect your sibling to support you the way you support them. You expect your supervisor to recognize your contributions without you having to point them out. And when these expectations aren't met, you don't just feel disappointed, you feel betrayed, disrespected, fundamentally unseen. The irony is that rigid expectations don't just make you suffer, they also prevent you from seeing people as they actually are. You're so busy comparing everyone to your mental template of how they should behave that you miss who they really are, what they're actually dealing with, and what they might be trying to communicate in their imperfect way. The third pattern is the control illusion. You believe, often unconsciously, that your emotional reactions can change other people's behavior. If you get angry enough, people will realize they're wrong. If you express frustration intensely enough, they'll start meeting your needs. If you withdraw emotionally, they'll notice and change their approach. This pattern is based on a fundamental misreading of human psychology. People rarely change because you're upset with them. In fact, emotional intensity usually triggers defensiveness and resistance, making change less likely. Your anger doesn't educate anyone. Your frustration doesn't motivate improvement. Your visible disappointment often breeds resentment rather than reflection. Here's the brutal reality. You cannot control other people. You cannot force your supervisor to be more appreciative. You cannot make your partner more attentive through emotional displays. You cannot shame your family members into respecting your boundaries. The only element you actually control is your own response to their behavior. And when you try to control others through emotional reactions, you're not just wasting energy. You're also giving them evidence that you're reactive, unstable, or difficult. These three patterns work together in a toxic cycle. You personalize someone's behavior, which violates your expectations about how they should act. So you try to control them through emotional reactions. This combination keeps you in a constant state of reactivity, where your emotional well-being depends on other people behaving the way you want them to behave. The people you admire for their unshakable composure have learned to operate differently. They don't take things personally because they understand that human behavior is primarily self-focused. People are thinking about their own problems, priorities, and perspectives, not about how to affect you. These composed individuals don't maintain rigid expectations because they've accepted that humans are inconsistent, imperfect, and shaped by factors you can't see. And they don't try to control others through emotional displays because they focus their energy on what they can actually influence: their own thoughts, responses, and boundaries. Breaking free from these patterns requires a fundamental shift in how you understand emotional responsibility. It means accepting that you're not the center of most people's decision-making. It means recognizing that your expectations are preferences, not requirements. It means acknowledging that your emotional reactions are your responsibility, not tools for changing others. This shift feels uncomfortable at first because these patterns have probably served you in some way. The personalization spiral kept you alert to potential threats. The expectation fortress gave you a sense of order and justice. The control illusion gave you the feeling that you could influence your environment. But these patterns are also what's keeping you trapped in reactivity. Chapter 2. Your brain's ancient emergency system. To truly master your emotional responses, you need to understand what's physically happening in your brain when someone triggers you. Most people think emotions just happen, like weather passing through, but emotions are actually the result of specific neurological processes that you can learn to recognize and interrupt. Deep in your brain, there's a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Think of it as your personal alarm system, always scanning, always vigilant, always ready to sound the emergency alert. When this alarm detects anything it interprets as threatening, offensive, or dangerous, it triggers what neuroscientists call an amygdala hijack. This happens faster than thought itself. Before your conscious mind even registers what's happening, your amygdala floods your system with stress chemicals, cortisol and adrenaline primarily. Your heart rate spikes, your muscles tense, your breathing becomes shallow, your pupils dilate, your digestive system shuts down. Blood flow redirects from your thinking brain to your major muscle groups. All of this happens in milliseconds, preparing you for fight or flight. This emergency system saved your ancestors' lives when they encountered predators or hostile rivals. The ability to react instantly without pausing to analyze meant the difference between survival and becoming lunch. But here's the problem. Your amygdala can't distinguish between a saber-toothed cat and a sarcastic comment from your teammate. It treats a perceived slight from your supervisor the same way it would treat a physical attack. During this hijack, something crucial happens. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational, thoughtful part of your brain, essentially goes offline. This is why brilliant, reasonable people say things they later regret when they're angry. It's why you can't think clearly during heated arguments. Your higher-order thinking has been temporarily disabled by your primitive survival mechanisms. The initial chemical flood lasts about 6 to 20 seconds, but the effects can linger for hours. During this time, you're literally operating with impaired judgment. Your brain is focused on the perceived threat and generating responses based on emotion rather than logic. This explains why it's nearly impossible to reason with someone mid-reaction, and why your own decision-making becomes compromised when you're triggered. But here's what changes everything. The amygdala hijack is not inevitable. It's a process that can be interrupted and redirected. The key is learning to recognize the warning signs early and having strategies ready before the hijack takes complete control. The warning signs appear in your body first. You might notice your jaw clenching, your shoulders rising toward your ears, your hands forming fists, your face feeling hot, your stomach tightening. These physical signals are your early warning system, your opportunity to intervene before your emotions take over your behavior. Mental warning signs follow quickly. Your thoughts become rapid and negative. Your focus narrows onto whatever's irritating you, blocking out everything else. Your inner voice becomes harsh and critical. You start mentally rehearsing arguments or comeback lines. These are all signals that your amygdala is activating its emergency protocols. Understanding this neuroscience gives you tremendous power because it helps you depersonalize your reactions. When you realize that anger and frustration are neurochemical events, temporary biological responses rather than accurate reflections of reality, you gain perspective. You start to see your emotions as passing weather patterns rather than fundamental truths. This scientific understanding also explains why some people seem naturally calm, while others are easily reactive. It's not that composed people don't have amygdalas or don't experience stress. They've simply trained their brains to recognize hijacking earlier and respond more effectively. They've strengthened their prefrontal cortex through practice and developed habits that prevent emotional reactions from escalating. Here's the encouraging part. Your brain is neuroplastic. It can be rewired through consistent practice. Every time you successfully interrupt an amygdala hijack, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with emotional regulation. Every time you choose a measured response over a reactive one, you make it easier to choose composure next time. This is why emotional control becomes easier with practice. You're literally building new brain circuits. Think of emotional fitness like physical fitness. You can strengthen your emotional regulation through practice just like you strengthen muscles through exercise. And just as physical fitness makes everyday activities easier, emotional fitness makes everyday interactions less stressful and more manageable. The people who never seem bothered have essentially trained their brains to respond differently to triggers. They've created strong neural pathways for composure and weak neural pathways for reactivity. They haven't eliminated emotions. They've learned to work with them skillfully instead of being controlled by them. Chapter 3. The Pause, Your Superpower. The most powerful technique for preventing emotional hijacking is also the simplest. I call it the pause protocol, and it's your first line of defense against reactive behavior. Between any trigger and your response, there exists a space. In that space lies your power to choose, and in that choice lies your freedom. Most people react automatically. Something happens, and they immediately respond based on their emotional state. A supervisor questions their approach, and they defend themselves instantly. Someone interrupts them in a meeting, and they interrupt back. A family member makes a critical comment, and they snap. This automatic reactivity is what keeps them trapped in emotional cycles. The pause protocol breaks this automatic pattern. It creates space between what happens and how you respond. In that space, you regain your power. You remember you have options. You reconnect with what actually matters to you. You allow your thinking brain to come back online so you can respond from wisdom rather than reaction. Here's how it works. The moment you notice any sign of emotional activation, any hint that you're becoming angry, frustrated, or bothered, you implement an immediate pause. This pause can be as brief as 3 seconds or as long as several minutes, depending on the intensity of your reaction and the context you're in. During this pause, you don't try to solve the problem or figure out what to say. You don't analyze the situation or justify your feelings. You simply create space. You breathe. You allow the initial chemical flood to subside without acting on it. The first level is the breath pause. When you notice emotional activation, immediately take 3 deep, deliberate breaths. This isn't just a relaxation technique, though it does calm your nervous system. More importantly, it's a pattern interrupt. It breaks the automatic connection between trigger and reaction. Do this. Inhale slowly through your nose for a count of 4. Hold that breath for 4 counts. Exhale slowly through your mouth for 6 counts. The longer exhale activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts the fight-or-flight response. While breathing, focus entirely on the physical sensation. Feel the cool air entering your nostrils. Notice your lungs expanding. Experience the release of the exhale. This mindful focus prevents your mind from spinning stories about what just happened or what you should do next. It anchors you in the present moment and gives your rational brain time to re-engage. The second level is the physical pause. If 3 breaths aren't enough, implement physical distance. Excuse yourself from the conversation. Take a walk around the block. Change your physical position. Movement helps metabolize the stress chemicals flooding your system. This is especially crucial during heated conversations. When you feel anger rising, when you notice yourself wanting to say something cutting or defensive, that's your signal to create physical space. Say something like, "I need a moment to process this," or "Let me take a brief walk and come back to this conversation." Many people resist this because they think it makes them look weak, or because they don't want to give the other person the last word. But the physical pause is actually a sign of strength. It demonstrates that you're in control of yourself and committed to handling situations effectively rather than just venting emotions. The third level is the time pause. For intense reactions or complex situations, you might need hours or even days to fully process your feelings and determine your best response. The time pause prevents you from making decisions or having conversations while you're still emotionally activated. You might say, "This matters to me, and I want to give it proper consideration. Can we continue this conversation tomorrow?" Or you might simply wait before responding to a message that triggered you. This ensures your response comes from clarity rather than reactivity. The key to making the pause protocol effective is practicing it before you need it. Most people only try to pause when they're already highly activated, and by then it's much harder. Instead, practice pausing during minor irritations. When someone takes too long at the coffee shop counter, when you're stuck in traffic, when you receive a mildly annoying email. Use these low-stakes situations to strengthen your pause reflex. The more you practice pausing during small frustrations, the more automatic it becomes during major provocations. You're rewiring your brain to choose pause over reaction, creating new neural pathways that prioritize conscious choice over automatic response. It's important to understand that the pause protocol isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending everything is fine. During the pause, you acknowledge your feelings without being controlled by them. You might say to yourself, "I notice I'm feeling frustrated right now," or "I can feel anger rising in my chest." This acknowledgement validates your emotional experience while maintaining your ability to choose how to respond. The pause also gives you time to reconnect with your bigger picture goals. In the heat of the moment, it's easy to forget what actually matters to you. You might value maintaining good relationships, but when you're angry, all you want is to prove you're right. You might value your reputation for professionalism, but when you're frustrated, you're tempted to send a sarcastic message. The pause helps you realign your response with your values rather than your momentary feelings. Mastering your internal narrative. Chapter 4. The Reframe Revolution. Rewriting your reality. The way you interpret what happens to you determines everything about how you feel. Two people can experience the identical situation and have completely opposite emotional reactions based solely on how they frame the experience in their minds. This is why reframing is one of the most transformative tools for emotional mastery. When you change your internal narrative about what's happening, you change your emotional response entirely. Most people don't realize they're constantly constructing stories about other people's behavior. A colleague doesn't acknowledge you in the hallway, and you tell yourself a story that they're upset with you or being deliberately rude. Your supervisor assigns you a challenging project, and you tell yourself a story that they are setting you up to fail. Your partner seems distracted during dinner, and you tell yourself a story that they are losing interest in the relationship. These internal narratives feel like facts, but they're actually interpretations. And since they're interpretations, they can be changed. When you learn to consciously reframe situations in more empowering ways, you gain extraordinary control over your emotional state. The first step in reframing is recognizing that you're telling yourself a story in the first place. Most people don't distinguish between what actually happened and their interpretation of what happened. They think their story is reality. But what actually happened is just the observable facts. Your colleague walked past without speaking. Your supervisor assigned you a complex project. Your partner was quiet during dinner. Everything else, the meaning you attach to these events, the motives you assign to these people, the implications you draw about their feelings toward you, that's your story. Once you recognize you're telling yourself a story, you can consciously choose a better one. A story that serves you rather than one that makes you suffer. a story that empowers you rather than one that makes you a victim, a story that opens possibilities rather than one that closes them down. Let me show you how this works in practice. Your team lead gives you critical feedback on a presentation. Your immediate story might be, "He's trying to undermine my credibility," or "He doesn't value my contributions," or "He's impossible to satisfy." These stories generate feelings of anger, resentment, and discouragement. But you could completely reframe the situation. Alternative story 1. "He's invested in my professional development and wants me to reach the next level." This story generates feelings of appreciation and motivation. Alternative story 2. "He has exacting standards because this presentation impacts the entire department's reputation." This story generates feelings of respect and determination. Alternative story 3. "He's under pressure from senior leadership and is sharing the feedback he received." This story generates feelings of empathy and understanding. Notice that all these alternative stories could be true. You have no definitive way of knowing your team lead's actual motives or the complete context of his feedback. So, why not choose the story that makes you feel resourceful and motivated rather than defensive and resentful? Here's another example. You're in the parking lot and someone takes the space you were waiting for. Your immediate story might be, "That person is inconsiderate and selfish." This story generates anger and stress, but you could reframe it. Alternative story 1. "That person probably didn't notice me waiting and is dealing with something urgent." Alternative story 2. "That person made a mistake and likely doesn't realize what happened." Alternative story 3. "That person is having a rough day and isn't thinking clearly." These reframes don't excuse inconsiderate behavior, but they prevent you from carrying anger and stress. That serves no purpose. They help you respond from understanding rather than outrage. The key to effective reframing is finding alternative stories that are both plausible and empowering. They don't have to be the most likely explanation, they just have to be possible, and they have to move you toward a more resourceful, emotional state. There are several powerful reframing techniques you can use in different situations. The first is the limitations reframe. Instead of assuming that people who behave poorly are malicious or disrespectful, assume they're limited. They don't have better tools. They haven't developed better communication skills. They're operating at their current level of awareness and capability. This reframe generates compassion instead of anger. The second is the struggle reframe. Instead of assuming difficult people are trying to hurt you, assume they're struggling themselves. People who are harsh, aggressive, or unreasonable are usually dealing with their own pain, insecurity, or overwhelming stress. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it helps you respond with empathy rather than defensiveness. The third is the teacher reframe. Instead of seeing difficult situations as problems or attacks, see them as opportunities to strengthen your emotional regulation skills. Every challenging person is helping you become more resilient and skilled. Every frustrating situation is a chance to prove to yourself that you can maintain composure regardless of external circumstances. The fourth is the temporary reframe. Instead of seeing someone's difficult mood or behavior as a permanent trait, see it as a temporary state. Everyone has challenging days. Everyone experiences stress and difficulties that affect their behavior. The person who's sharp with you today might be warm and helpful tomorrow. This reframe prevents you from writing people off based on limited interactions. The fifth is the information reframe. Instead of seeing criticism or feedback as attacks on your character, see them as data that can help you improve. Even if the feedback is delivered poorly or motivated by someone else's agenda, there might still be valuable insights you can extract. This reframe transforms potential sources of anger into opportunities for growth. Reframing takes practice because your brain is evolutionarily wired to notice threats and problems. Your survival instincts make you quick to interpret ambiguous situations negatively. It was safer for your ancestors to assume that rustling in the bushes was a predator rather than the wind. But with conscious effort, you can train your brain to look for alternative explanations and more empowering interpretations. The goal isn't to become naive or to excuse genuinely harmful behavior. Some people do act with malicious intent. Some situations are genuinely unfair or problematic. But even in these cases, the most empowering response usually comes from framing the situation in a way that preserves your emotional equilibrium and positions you to respond effectively rather than reactively. When you master reframing, you realize that very few things that happen to you are inherently good or bad. They're mostly neutral events that become positive or negative based on how you choose to interpret them. This realization is incredibly liberating because it means you're never at the mercy of circumstances. You always have the power to choose a narrative that serves you. Chapter 5. The Detachment System, Your Emotional Independence. The ultimate goal of emotional mastery isn't just managing your reactions in the moment. It's developing deep emotional independence. This means your emotional state is determined by your own choices and values, not by other people's behavior or external circumstances. It means that while you can still be affected by what happens around you, you're not controlled by it. Most people live in emotional dependence. Their mood depends on how others treat them. Their self-worth depends on external validation. Their stress levels depend on whether things unfold according to their plans. This emotional dependence makes them vulnerable to every person they encounter and every situation they face. It gives other people enormous power over their inner experience. Emotional independence is different. It's the ability to maintain your emotional equilibrium regardless of what's happening around you. It's not indifference or emotional disconnection. It's not becoming cold or detached from others. It's developing an inner stability that allows you to care deeply while also remaining unshakable. The foundation of emotional independence is understanding the difference between what's within your control and what isn't. You cannot control other people's behavior, but you can control your response to it. You cannot control external circumstances, but you can control your attitude toward them. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can control what you make it mean and how you respond. This understanding leads to what I call the detachment system. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring about outcomes or relationships. It means you don't attach your emotional well-being to things you cannot control. You care about your work, but you don't attach your self-worth to whether your supervisor appreciates you. You care about your relationships, but you don't attach your happiness to whether others always treat you perfectly. The first principle of the detachment system is emotional self-sufficiency. This means you meet your own emotional needs rather than depending on others to meet them for you. If you need validation, you validate yourself. If you need security, you create it through your own actions and mindset. If you need appreciation, you appreciate yourself. Most people seek these emotional needs from external sources, which makes them vulnerable to disappointment and manipulation. They need their supervisor to recognize them, to feel valuable. They need their friends to include them, to feel worthy. They need their romantic partner to constantly reassure them to feel secure. This dependence creates anxiety and resentment because other people cannot and will not always provide what you need when you need it. When you become emotionally self-sufficient, you can enjoy validation, appreciation, and connection from others without needing them to maintain your emotional stability. This makes your relationships healthier and more enjoyable because you're not constantly seeking something from other people. You're able to give and receive from a place of abundance rather than neediness. The second principle is outcome independence. This means that while you work toward your goals and preferences, you don't attach your emotional state to whether you achieve them. You prefer that people treat you with respect, but you don't need them to in order to maintain your self-respect. You want your projects to succeed, but you don't need external success to feel internally successful. Outcome independence doesn't mean you stop caring about results or stop working hard to achieve your goals. It means your emotional well-being doesn't rise and fall with external outcomes. You maintain your inner stability regardless of what happens, because you know that your value as a person isn't determined by external circumstances. This principle is particularly powerful in dealing with difficult people, because it removes their ability to manipulate or control you through their behavior. If someone is dismissive to you and you need their approval to feel good about yourself, their dismissiveness has power over you. But if you're outcome independent, their behavior becomes irrelevant to your emotional state. They can be as dismissive as they want, and it doesn't affect your inner peace. The third principle is identity independence. This means your sense of who you are doesn't depend on external roles, achievements, or other people's opinions. You know who you are at your core, and that identity remains stable regardless of changing circumstances. Many people derive their identity from their career, their relationships, their possessions, or their achievements. When these external things change or are threatened, their sense of self becomes unstable. They take criticism personally because they see it as an attack on their identity. They become defensive when challenged because they feel their worth is being questioned. When you develop identity independence, you see yourself as separate from these external roles and achievements. You might be a manager, but that's what you do, not who you are. You might be successful, but that's your current situation, not your essential identity. This separation allows you to receive feedback, face challenges, and deal with difficult people without feeling like your core self is under attack. The fourth principle is boundary mastery. Emotional independence requires clear boundaries between yourself and others. You need to know where you end and they begin. You need to distinguish between their emotions and your emotions, their problems and your problems, their responsibilities and your responsibilities. Many people struggle with emotional boundaries. They absorb other people's emotions as if they were their own. They feel guilty when others are unhappy, even when they're not responsible for that unhappiness. They feel obligated to fix other people's problems or manage their emotional states. This lack of boundaries creates constant stress and makes emotional independence impossible. Healthy boundaries allow you to care about others without taking responsibility for their emotional well-being. You can empathize with someone's pain without absorbing it. You can support someone through difficulties without feeling obligated to solve their problems. You can maintain your own emotional equilibrium while still being present and compassionate with others. The fifth principle is present moment awareness. Emotional independence is easier to maintain when you're focused on the present rather than ruminating about the past or worrying about the future. Most emotional reactivity comes from mental time travel. You replay past hurts and imagine future threats. You carry grudges from yesterday and anxieties about tomorrow. When you anchor yourself in the present moment, you're dealing only with what's actually happening right now, not with all the stories and projections your mind creates. This makes situations much more manageable and reduces emotional reactivity. You respond to what is rather than what you think might be or what you remember was. Developing emotional independence through the detachment system takes time and consistent practice. It requires fundamentally changing how you relate to your emotions, your relationships, and your circumstances. But the freedom it provides is extraordinary. When you're emotionally independent, you become unshakable. Other people's behavior might disappoint you, but it doesn't devastate you. External circumstances might challenge you, but they don't control you. You maintain your inner peace regardless of the chaos around you. This doesn't mean you stop feeling emotions or caring about people. It means you experience life from a place of internal stability rather than external dependence. Chapter 6. The 4 Personality Archetypes that trigger everyone. Not all difficult people are created equal. There are specific personality archetypes that consistently trigger emotional reactions in others, and each type requires a different approach to maintain your emotional equilibrium. Once you understand these 4 patterns and learn the specific strategies for dealing with each one, you'll never be caught off guard again. The first archetype is the bulldozer. These are people who use intimidation, raised voices, interruptions, and aggressive body language to control situations and people around them. They might be your demanding supervisor who becomes hostile when things don't go their way, the aggressive driver who honks furiously and makes threatening gestures, or the family member who dominates every conversation and dismisses other people's ideas. Bulldozers trigger fight-or-flight responses in most people. When someone raises their voice or becomes hostile, your amygdala immediately interprets this as a threat and floods your system with stress chemicals. Your natural instinct is either to fight back with equal aggression or to retreat and submit. Both responses give the bulldozer exactly what they want, either a conflict they can escalate or submission they can exploit. The key to dealing with bulldozers is refusing to play their game. Don't match their energy level or try to out-dominate them. Instead, remain calm and speak in a lower, slower tone than normal. This creates what's called emotional contagion in reverse. Instead of catching their aggressive energy, you're projecting calm energy that can actually lower their arousal level. Maintain steady eye contact without staring aggressively. Keep your body language open but grounded. Don't cross your arms defensively, but don't make yourself small either. Use what I call the steady statement technique. Pick one simple, reasonable statement and repeat it calmly, no matter how much they escalate. For example, I understand you're upset, and I want to find a solution that works for both of us. The second archetype is the shadow fighter. These people express their anger and frustration indirectly through sarcasm, silent treatment, deliberate inefficiency, or subtle sabotage. They might be the teammate who agrees to help, but then repeatedly forgets. The romantic partner who says everything is fine, but then punishes you with coldness. Or the friend who makes cutting jokes at your expense and then claims they were just kidding. Shadow fighters are particularly frustrating because their behavior is ambiguous. You know something is wrong, but when you address it directly, they deny there's a problem. This makes you question your own perceptions and often leads to explosive anger when you finally reach your breaking point. The strategy for dealing with shadow fighters is radical transparency and boundary setting. Call out the behavior directly and calmly. I notice that every time we discuss this topic, you say everything is fine, but then you seem distant. I'd prefer if you could tell me directly what's bothering you. Don't let them manipulate you into thinking you're imagining things. Set clear consequences for shadow fighting behavior and follow through consistently. If someone says they'll do something but repeatedly forgets, stop relying on them and find alternative solutions. Don't reward their manipulation with emotional reactions or by trying harder to please them. This only reinforces the behavior. The third archetype is the energy drain. These are people who constantly complain, dramatize minor problems, seek attention through crisis, and exhaust the energy of everyone around them. They might be the teammate who has a new crisis every day, the friend who calls constantly to vent about the same problems without ever taking advice, or the family member who turns every gathering into a therapy session about their latest tragedy. Energy drains trigger two problematic responses in most people. Either you become their unpaid therapist, constantly trying to fix their problems and manage their emotions, or you become frustrated and judgmental about their constant negativity. Both responses drain your energy and emotional reserves. The approach for energy drains is compassionate detachment. You can care about their well-being without taking responsibility for their emotional state. Set time limits for conversations. I have 15 minutes to talk, and then I need to focus on my work. Don't try to solve their problems or give advice unless they specifically ask for it. And even then, limit yourself to 1 or 2 suggestions. Use the redirect technique. That sounds challenging, and I hope you find a solution. I need to focus on something else right now. Practice emotional boundaries by not absorbing their negative energy. You can listen without taking on their emotions as your own. The fourth archetype is the spotlight seeker. These people need to be the center of attention at all times. They interrupt others, monopolize conversations, exaggerate their achievements, and become hostile when they're not getting enough focus. They might be the colleague who takes credit for team accomplishments, the acquaintance who turns every story you tell into a bigger story about themselves, or the social media connection who constantly posts dramatic updates designed to generate sympathy or admiration. Spotlight seekers trigger frustration because they seem oblivious to social norms and other people's needs. You want to call them out, correct their exaggerations, or find ways to get recognition for your own contributions. These responses often backfire because they provide the attention and drama that spotlight seekers crave. The strategy for dealing with spotlight seekers is strategic disengagement. Don't compete for attention or try to correct their stories. Instead, give them brief, polite acknowledgement and then redirect your attention elsewhere. "That's interesting, Sarah." Then turn to someone else or change the subject. Don't feed their need for drama by getting upset or arguing with them. This only gives them more material and energy to work with. In group settings, focus on connecting with other people rather than trying to manage the spotlight seeker's behavior. Often, others are as frustrated as you are and will appreciate your leadership in redirecting the group's energy. Understanding these 4 archetypes helps you realize that difficult behavior is usually not personal. Bulldozers have learned that intimidation gets them what they want. Shadow fighters have learned that direct confrontation feels dangerous, so they express anger indirectly. Energy drains have learned that crisis and drama get them attention and support. Spotlight seekers have learned that they need to dominate attention to feel valuable. None of these patterns are really about you. They're coping mechanisms these people developed based on their own experiences and psychological needs. When you understand the underlying pattern, you can respond to the pattern rather than reacting to the specific behavior. This keeps you calm and strategic rather than emotional and reactive. Advanced Social Mastery, Chapter 7, Reading Beyond Words. The social intelligence advantage. Most people focus exclusively on what others say, but the real communication happens beneath the surface. Body language, vocal tone, facial microexpressions, and energy levels communicate far more than words ever do. When you learn to read these subtle signals, you gain tremendous advantage in social situations because you can see what's really happening beneath the surface conversation. Understanding social intelligence starts with recognizing that all human behavior serves a purpose. When someone acts in a way that seems irrational or frustrating, they're usually trying to meet a psychological need. They might need to feel important, safe, understood, or in control. When you can identify the underlying need driving someone's behavior, you can respond to the need rather than the behavior, which is far more effective. The first level of social intelligence is reading emotional states through physical cues. When people are stressed, anxious, or upset, their bodies reveal it even when their words don't. Stress shows up as increased muscle tension, particularly in the shoulders, jaw, and hands. Anxious people often display self-soothing behaviors like touching their neck, adjusting their clothing, or tapping their fingers. Frustrated people show micro expressions of tension around their eyes and mouth, even when they're trying to appear calm. Learning to spot these physical signs gives you a huge advantage because you can adjust your approach before someone's emotions escalate. If you notice that someone is becoming tense during a conversation, you can lower your voice, slow down your speech, or suggest taking a brief break. This prevents conflicts before they start and helps people feel more comfortable around you. The second level is understanding personality-driven behavior patterns. Some people are naturally more reserved and need time to process information before responding. Others are expressive and think out loud, sometimes saying things they don't really mean. Some people are detail-focused and need thorough explanations, while others are big-picture thinkers who become impatient with too much information. When you can quickly assess someone's communication style, you can adapt your approach to match their preferences. With reserved people, give them space to think and don't pressure them for immediate responses. With expressive people, be prepared for rapid conversation and don't take their quick reactions personally. With detail-oriented people, provide thorough explanations and be prepared to answer specific questions. With big-picture people, lead with the main point and only provide details if they ask. The third level is recognizing power dynamics and social hierarchies. Every social interaction involves some element of status, even if it's subtle. People signal their perceived status through posture, eye contact, vocal tone, and the amount of space they occupy. Understanding these dynamics helps you navigate social situations more effectively. Higher status individuals typically display open body language, make direct eye contact, speak with confident vocal tones, and occupy more physical space. They interrupt more frequently and expect to be heard when they speak. Lower status individuals often display more closed body language, avoid direct eye contact, speak with less confident tones, and make themselves physically smaller. This doesn't mean higher status behavior is better or that you should always try to appear high status. It means you should be aware of these dynamics so you can respond appropriately. If you're dealing with someone who needs to feel high status, you can give them that without compromising your own position. If you're dealing with someone who feels low status, you can help them feel more comfortable and confident. The fourth level is detecting incongruence and misalignment. When people's words don't match their true feelings, their bodies usually reveal the discrepancy. Someone might say they're fine while their facial expression shows distress. They might claim to agree with you while their body language shows resistance. Learning to spot these misalignments helps you understand what people really think and feel, not just what they're willing to say. Common signs of incongruence include mismatched facial expressions, where someone's mouth says one thing, but their eyes say another. Voice-body mismatches, where someone's words are positive, but their tone or posture is negative, and timing inconsistencies, where someone's emotional reactions are delayed or seem forced. When you notice incongruence, don't immediately call it out directly. Instead, create space for the person to express their real feelings. Ask open-ended questions like, "How are you really feeling about this?" Or, "Is there something else on your mind?" Often people aren't fully aware of their own emotional state or feel unsafe expressing their true feelings initially. The fifth level is understanding contextual and cultural communication styles. Different cultures, generations, and professional environments have different norms for emotional expression, directness, and social interaction. What seems harsh or aggressive in one context might be perfectly normal in another. What seems friendly and appropriate in one setting might be too informal in another. Developing cultural sensitivity helps you avoid misinterpreting others' behavior and prevents you from triggering negative reactions unintentionally. Before judging someone's communication style, consider their background and the context you're operating in. What might seem like disrespect could be a cultural difference in directness. What might appear to be coldness could be professional appropriateness. The key to using social intelligence effectively is gathering information without making judgments. Observe what you see and hear without immediately deciding what it means about the person's character or intentions. Look for patterns over time rather than making conclusions based on single interactions. Use your observations to guide your responses, not to judge or manipulate others. Social intelligence also requires emotional regulation on your part. When you can see what's really happening in social interactions, you might notice manipulation, insecurity, or negative intentions that others miss. It's tempting to feel superior or to use this information to your advantage. But effective social intelligence is about creating better interactions for everyone, not about gaining power over others. Chapter 8. The Conflict Transformation Method. From battle to breakthrough conflict is inevitable in human relationships, but suffering through conflict is optional. Most people approach conflict as a battle to be won or lost, but this mindset guarantees that someone will be hurt and relationships will be damaged. The conflict transformation method reframes conflict as an opportunity for deeper understanding, stronger relationships, and personal growth. Traditional conflict resolution focuses on finding compromises and solutions, which can be valuable. But conflict transformation goes deeper. It recognizes that most conflicts aren't really about the surface issue people are arguing about. They're about underlying needs, values, fears, and past experiences that create emotional charge around specific situations. For example, two teammates might argue about project timelines, but the real conflict might be about respect, autonomy, or fear of failure. A romantic couple might fight about household responsibilities, but the underlying issue might be about feeling valued or supported. A parent and teenager might battle over curfew, but the deeper conflict might be about independence and safety. The first principle of conflict transformation is shifting from positions to interests. Positions are what people say they want. I need you to finish this by Friday. I deserve a larger office. You need to respond to messages faster. Interests are the underlying needs and concerns that drive these positions: efficiency, respect, fairness, security, connection. When you focus on interests rather than positions, you often discover that people's underlying needs aren't in conflict at all. The supervisor wants the project completed with quality, and the employee wants time to do excellent work. Both needs can be met through creative solutions that rigid position-taking would never reveal. To identify interests, ask questions that go beneath surface demands. Instead of arguing about what someone wants, Explore why they want it. Help me understand what's most important to you about this. What would need to happen for you to feel good about this situation? What concerns you most about this? The second principle is emotional validation before problem solving. Most people try to resolve conflicts by immediately jumping into negotiations and compromises. But this approach fails when people are emotionally activated. When someone feels angry, hurt, or misunderstood, their rational problem-solving abilities are compromised. They need emotional acknowledgement before they can engage in productive dialogue. Emotional validation doesn't mean you agree with someone's position or behavior. It means you acknowledge their feelings and show that you understand their experience. I can see that you're really frustrated about this. It sounds like you're feeling overlooked. I understand that this situation is really important to you. Validation has a powerful calming effect because it meets people's fundamental need to be understood. When people feel heard and acknowledged, their defensive reactions often decrease dramatically. They become more open to hearing your perspective and more willing to work toward mutually beneficial solutions. The third principle is collaborative exploration rather than adversarial debate. Traditional conflict approaches involve each side presenting their case and trying to convince the other side they're wrong. This creates a win-lose dynamic where someone has to be right and someone has to be wrong. Collaborative exploration treats conflict as a shared puzzle to solve together. Use language that emphasizes partnership rather than opposition. Instead of, "You always interrupt me," try, "I've noticed we both get excited and sometimes talk over each other. How can we make sure we both get heard?" Instead of, "Your approach won't work," try, "I'm having some concerns about that approach. Can we explore some alternatives together?" Ask questions that invite exploration rather than questions that put people on the defensive. What would make this work better for you? Is more collaborative than, "Why don't you just do it correctly?" "What am I missing about your perspective?" is more open than, "How can you possibly think that?" The fourth principle is taking responsibility for your own contribution to the conflict. Most people focus entirely on what the other person did wrong and what they need to change. But every conflict involves at least two people, and everyone contributes something to the dynamic. Taking ownership of your part, even if you believe the other person is more wrong, dramatically changes the energy of the interaction. This doesn't mean accepting blame for things you didn't do, or apologizing for having needs and boundaries. It means acknowledging ways you might have contributed to misunderstandings, escalated emotions, or made the situation more difficult. I realize I didn't communicate clearly about my expectations. I can see how my tone might have come across as dismissive. I should have brought this up sooner instead of letting it build up. When you take responsibility first, you often inspire the other person to do the same. You model the kind of mature, relationship-focused approach that leads to genuine resolution rather than temporary truces. The fifth principle is focusing on future solutions rather than past grievances. Many conflicts get stuck because people spend all their time relitigating what happened, who was right, and who was wrong. While it's important to understand what went wrong, The goal should be preventing similar problems in the future, rather than proving who was more justified in their reactions. Shift the conversation toward future-focused questions. How can we handle this differently next time? What would need to change for both of us to feel good about this? What agreements can we make going forward? This approach is more productive because it empowers both people to create change rather than just assigning blame. The conflict transformation method requires you to regulate your own emotions throughout the process. When someone is criticizing you or expressing anger, your natural instinct is to defend yourself or counterattack. But transformation requires you to stay curious about their experience while also maintaining your own center. This is where all the previous techniques become crucial. Use the pause protocol to stay calm. Apply reframing to look for the underlying needs beneath aggressive or hurtful words. Practice detachment to avoid taking things personally while still caring about the relationship and the outcome. Remember that conflict transformation isn't about avoiding conflict or keeping the peace at any cost. Healthy conflicts can strengthen relationships by addressing real issues and clearing up misunderstandings. The goal isn't to eliminate conflict, but to engage in it skillfully with respect for both people's needs and commitment to the relationship's long-term health. Chapter 9. The Energy Management System, Fueling Your Emotional Resilience. Your emotional state isn't just determined by what happens to you, but by your overall energy levels, stress management, and lifestyle choices. When you're physically depleted, emotionally drained, or mentally exhausted, you have much less capacity for emotional regulation. The energy management system ensures you maintain the internal resources necessary to stay calm and composed even in challenging situations. Most people think of emotional control as a purely mental skill, but it's actually a whole-body phenomenon. Your brain uses enormous amounts of energy for emotional regulation. When your energy reserves are low, your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thinking and impulse control, goes offline first. This is why you're more likely to snap at people when you're tired, hungry, or stressed. The first component of energy management is physical energy optimization. This includes the obvious factors like adequate sleep, proper nutrition, and regular movement. But it also includes less obvious factors like breathing patterns, posture, and environmental stressors. Sleep deprivation has a devastating effect on emotional regulation. When you don't get enough quality sleep, your amygdala becomes hyperactive while your prefrontal cortex becomes sluggish. This combination makes you more likely to perceive threats where none exist and less able to control your reactions to those perceived threats. Even one night of poor sleep can significantly impair your ability to handle difficult people and stressful situations. Create a sleep environment that supports quality rest. Keep your bedroom cool, dark, and quiet. Avoid screens for at least an hour before bed because blue light disrupts your natural sleep hormones. Establish a consistent sleep schedule even on weekends to regulate your circadian rhythms. If you struggle with racing thoughts at bedtime, keep a journal next to your bed and write down anything you're worried about or need to remember. This helps clear your mind for sleep. Blood sugar stability is equally important for emotional regulation. When your blood sugar drops, your body releases stress hormones to try to bring it back up. These stress hormones make you more irritable, anxious, and reactive. Eating regular balanced meals with protein, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates helps maintain stable energy levels throughout the day. Avoid the common trap of using caffeine and sugar to manage energy crashes. While these can provide temporary boosts, they often lead to larger crashes later, creating a cycle of energy instability that makes emotional regulation much more difficult. The second component is emotional energy conservation. Just as your body has limited physical energy, your mind has limited emotional energy. Every time you have to regulate a strong emotion, make a difficult decision, or resist an impulse, you use some of your emotional energy reserves. When these reserves are depleted, you become more reactive and less able to maintain your composure. One of the biggest drains on emotional energy is carrying unresolved emotional baggage from past interactions. If you had a frustrating conversation with a teammate in the morning, and you spend the rest of the day replaying it in your mind and imagining what you should have said, you're continuously draining your emotional energy. By the time you get home, you have little left for your family or personal activities. Learn to process and release emotional experiences rather than carrying them with you throughout the day. After any interaction that triggers strong emotions, take a few minutes to consciously process what happened. Acknowledge your feelings without judgment. I'm feeling frustrated because that conversation didn't go the way I hoped. Then consciously choose to let it go. I did my best in that situation, and I'll handle it differently if it comes up again. The third component is attention management. Your attention is a finite resource, and where you focus your attention dramatically affects your emotional state. If you spend your mental energy focusing on things that frustrate, worry, or annoy you, you'll feel frustrated, worried, and annoyed. If you consciously direct your attention toward things that inspire, energize, or calm you, you'll feel more positive and resilient. Most people allow their attention to be hijacked by whatever is loudest, most urgent, or most emotionally charged. They start their day by checking news and social media, filling their minds with information designed to trigger strong emotional reactions. They spend their time at work focused on problems, complaints, and stressful deadlines. They end their day by consuming entertainment designed to be dramatic and emotionally stimulating. This pattern of attention management is exhausting and makes emotional regulation much more difficult. Instead, consciously choose what deserves your mental energy. Start your day with activities that center and energize you, whether that's meditation, movement, reading something inspiring, or simply sitting quietly with your morning coffee. Throughout the day, regularly redirect your attention away from drama and negativity toward things that support your well-being and goals. The fourth component is environment management. Your physical and social environment has a profound impact on your emotional state and your ability to regulate your emotions. Cluttered, noisy, or chaotic environments create low-level stress that depletes your regulatory resources. Toxic relationships and negative social dynamics do the same thing. Take inventory of your environmental stressors and eliminate as many as possible. This might mean organizing your living and working spaces, reducing noise pollution, or limiting time with people who consistently drain your energy. Create environments that support calmness and focus rather than stress and distraction. The fifth component is recovery and restoration practices. Just as athletes need recovery time between workouts to maintain peak performance, you need regular practices that restore your emotional and mental energy. This doesn't just mean relaxation, though that's important. It means activities that actively replenish your resources and strengthen your capacity for emotional regulation. Different people find restoration through different activities. Some people restore through solitude and quiet activities like reading, walking in nature, or creative pursuits. Others restore through social connection and shared activities. Some need physical movement and exercise, while others need mental stimulation and learning. The key is identifying what truly restores you versus what you think should restore you, or what other people find restorative. Pay attention to how different activities affect your energy levels and emotional state. Activities that truly restore you should leave you feeling more energized, centered, and capable, not more depleted or agitated. Regular restoration isn't a luxury or something to do when you have extra time. It's a necessity for maintaining your capacity to handle difficult people and challenging situations with grace and composure. When you consistently manage your energy levels, you become much more resilient and much less reactive to external stressors. Mastery in your most important domains. Chapter 10. The Professional Mastery Protocol. Thriving in High-Stakes Environments. The workplace is often the most challenging environment for maintaining emotional control because it combines high stakes with personality conflicts, power dynamics, and constant pressure. Unlike personal relationships where you can choose to limit contact with difficult people, professional environments require you to work effectively with people you might not choose to spend time with otherwise. This chapter will give you the advanced strategies for remaining unshakable in your career while actually accelerating your professional success. The first principle of professional emotional mastery is understanding that your emotional control directly impacts your career trajectory. People who can remain calm under pressure, handle criticism gracefully, and navigate conflict skillfully are perceived as leadership material. Those who react emotionally to workplace challenges are seen as liabilities, regardless of their technical skills or qualifications. This creates a powerful incentive structure. Every time you choose composure over reactivity, you're not just feeling better in the moment, you're building your professional reputation as someone who can handle responsibility and pressure. Every time you respond to workplace drama with equanimity, you're demonstrating executive-level emotional intelligence. The challenging supervisor scenario is one of the most common professional triggers. Whether your supervisor is micromanaging, taking credit for your work, setting unrealistic expectations, or providing harsh feedback, your response to their behavior determines both your immediate experience and your long-term career prospects. The key insight is that challenging supervisors are often under tremendous pressure themselves. Their behavior is usually more about their own stress, insecurities, and performance anxieties than about your capabilities. When you understand this context, you can respond strategically rather than personally. If your supervisor is highly critical, resist the urge to defend yourself immediately or become defensive. Instead, ask clarifying questions that demonstrate your commitment to excellence. I want to make sure I understand exactly what you're looking for. Can you help me identify the specific areas where I should focus my improvements? This response shows maturity and redirects the conversation toward solutions rather than blame. If your supervisor takes credit for your work, document your contributions without making it about confrontation. Send follow-up messages that outline your role in projects. Thanks for the positive feedback on the Martinez account. I'm glad my research on market segmentation and my proposal for the new outreach strategy contributed to the successful outcome. This creates a record while appearing collaborative rather than defensive. The difficult teammate dynamic requires a different approach because peer relationships are more complex than hierarchical ones. You need to maintain working relationships while protecting yourself from undermining, gossip, or passive-aggressive behavior. The most effective strategy is professional boundaries with personal warmth. Be friendly and collegial in your interactions, but don't share personal information or get drawn into office politics. When colleagues try to involve you in complaining about others or spreading gossip, redirect the conversation. I'd rather focus on how we can make this project successful. Or, I haven't had that experience with them, but let's talk about how to move forward. If a teammate tries to undermine you in meetings, respond with facts rather than emotions. Actually, the research shows, or my experience with that approach has been, don't attack their credibility. Just present alternative information confidently. This approach makes you appear knowledgeable and reasonable while highlighting their inaccuracy without direct confrontation. High-pressure deadline situations are where emotional control becomes most critical. When everyone around you is stressed and reactive, your calmness becomes a superpower. You can think more clearly, make better decisions, and often become the person others look to for leadership. Create personal systems for high-pressure periods. Break large projects into smaller, manageable tasks. Set internal deadlines that are earlier than external ones to create buffer time. Communicate proactively with stakeholders about progress and potential challenges rather than waiting for them to ask. These practices reduce external pressure and give you more control over stressful situations. During crisis moments, use your emotional regulation skills to become the stabilizing force in your team. Speak more slowly and deliberately than usual. Ask thoughtful questions that help others clarify their thinking. Focus on solutions rather than problems. What are our options here? And what would need to happen for this to work are much more productive than "this is impossible" or "why didn't someone think of this earlier?" Feedback and criticism, whether in formal performance reviews or casual comments, trigger defensive reactions in most people. But professional mastery requires developing the ability to receive feedback as valuable information rather than personal attacks. When receiving criticism, resist the urge to explain, justify, or defend your actions immediately. Instead, ask questions that demonstrate your openness to learning. Can you give me a specific example of when this was a problem? Or What would success look like in this area? This approach shows that you're focused on improvement rather than self-protection. If feedback feels unfair or inaccurate, don't argue in the moment. Thank the person for their perspective and ask for time to reflect on their comments. This gives you space to consider whether there might be some truth to their observations and to formulate a thoughtful response if you disagree. Office politics and interpersonal drama are inevitable in most workplace environments. The key to navigating these situations without getting emotionally triggered is maintaining strategic neutrality. You don't have to take sides in every conflict or have opinions about every personality clash. When people try to draw you into conflicts that don't directly involve you, practice diplomatic disengagement. That sounds like something you should discuss directly with them. Or, I don't have enough information to have an opinion on that situation. This keeps you out of unnecessary drama while maintaining good relationships with all parties. The most professionally successful people understand that workplace relationships are strategic partnerships, not friendships. You can be warm and collegial without sharing everything. You can be supportive without getting entangled in other people's conflicts. You can advance your career while helping others advance theirs. Chapter 11. The Family Dynamics Decoder. Navigating your most complex relationships. Family relationships are often the most emotionally charged interactions we navigate because they involve our deepest attachments, longest histories, and most ingrained patterns. The people who raised us, grew up with us, or share our genetic makeup know exactly which buttons to push and often feel entitled to push them. Mastering emotional control within family systems requires understanding the unique dynamics that make these relationships so triggering and developing strategies specifically designed for these complex bonds. The first challenge in family relationships is that everyone operates from outdated versions of each other. Your parents might still see you as the insecure teenager you were 15 years ago. Your siblings might relate to you based on childhood dynamics that no longer reflect who you are. You might find yourself falling into old patterns of behavior that you've outgrown in every other area of your life. This phenomenon happens because family systems resist change. Every family develops unspoken rules about who plays what role, who has what power, and how conflicts get resolved. When one person starts changing these patterns, the system pushes back to restore its familiar equilibrium, even if that equilibrium is dysfunctional. Understanding this dynamic helps you avoid taking family members' resistance personally. When your father criticizes your career choices, he might not be commenting on your current reality so much as trying to maintain his role as the person who guides and protects you. When your sibling dismisses your opinions, they might be operating from childhood competition dynamics rather than evaluating your actual ideas. The strategy for handling family enmeshment is creating adult boundaries while maintaining loving connections. This means you can care about family members without taking responsibility for their emotions or allowing them to control your choices. You can participate in family gatherings without getting drawn into historical conflicts or feeling obligated to fix everyone's problems. Holiday gatherings and family events are particularly challenging because they force you to spend extended time with people you might not choose to be around in other circumstances. Everyone's stress levels are elevated, alcohol might be involved, and old grievances tend to resurface. Prepare for these events by setting realistic expectations and planning your responses to predictable triggers. If Aunt Linda always makes inappropriate comments about your relationship status, decide in advance that you won't engage in those conversations. If your father always comments on your career or life choices, prepare neutral responses that don't escalate the situation. Create exit strategies for overwhelming situations. Drive yourself to events so you can leave when necessary. Set time limits for visits. Have polite phrases ready for disengaging from problematic conversations. I'm going to help with the dishes, or I need some fresh air, can get you out of tense situations without creating drama. Parenting situations test emotional regulation skills in unique ways because they combine unconditional love with daily frustrations and the enormous responsibility of shaping another human being. Children and teenagers are naturally self-focused and often lack the emotional regulation skills you're trying to model. They can be demanding, ungrateful, and deliberately provocative, all while being completely dependent on your care and guidance. The key insight for parenting with emotional control is that your children's behavior is usually about their developmental stage and individual temperament, not about your parenting competence or their opinion of you. Young children have meltdowns because their emotional regulation systems are still developing. Teenagers push boundaries because they're neurologically programmed to seek independence even when they lack the skills to handle it responsibly. When your child is having a meltdown or being defiant, remember that they need you to be the emotionally regulated adult in the situation. If you react with anger or frustration, you're adding to the emotional chaos rather than providing the stability they need to learn regulation skills themselves. Use the same pause protocol with your children that you use in other relationships, but adapt it for the parenting context. Take deep breaths. Lower your voice. Remind yourself that this is a teaching moment rather than a personal attack. Ask yourself what your child needs in this moment rather than what they deserve as punishment for their behavior. Dealing with aging parents presents different emotional challenges as the power dynamics shift, and you watch people you've always seen as strong and capable become vulnerable and dependent. This transition can trigger grief, resentment, and fear as you confront your own mortality and the reality that your parents are no longer the people who can protect and guide you. The strategy here is accepting the role reversal while honoring the relationship's history. Your parents might need your care and decision-making support, but they still deserve respect for their autonomy and dignity. You can be helpful without being controlling, supportive without being condescending. When elderly parents become difficult, remember that they're often dealing with loss of independence, physical pain, cognitive changes, or fear about their future. Their irritability or resistance to help might be more about grieving their losses than about your specific suggestions or assistance. Extended family drama, including divorced parents, stepfamilies, and in-laws, creates complex webs of competing loyalties and conflicting expectations. You might find yourself caught between people you care about who are in conflict with each other, or dealing with family members by marriage who have different values and communication styles than you're used to. The principle here is that you cannot fix other people's relationships or resolve conflicts that existed before you arrived on the scene. Don't try to mediate between divorced parents, reform difficult in-laws, or create harmony in blended families. Focus on maintaining your own relationships with each person individually rather than trying to manage the larger family system. Set clear boundaries about what you will and won't discuss with different family members. You don't have to listen to complaints about other family members or carry messages between people who aren't speaking to each other. That sounds like something you should discuss with them directly, becomes a standard response to triangulation attempts. Chapter 12, The Social Mastery System, Thriving Beyond Work and Family. Social situations outside of work and family present their own unique challenges for emotional regulation. Whether you're dealing with strangers in public spaces, acquaintances at social events, or service providers in commercial transactions, these interactions test your ability to maintain composure when you have no ongoing relationship to protect and limited information about the other person's motivations or constraints. The first principle of social mastery is recognizing that most people's behavior in public reflects their internal state rather than their opinion of you. The impatient barista might be dealing with a personal crisis, working a double shift, or being pressured by management to serve customers faster. The aggressive driver might be rushing to a medical emergency, dealing with severe stress, or struggling with anger management as a symptom of deeper emotional problems. This understanding helps you depersonalize public rudeness and inconsiderate behavior. When someone cuts in line, speaks dismissively to you, or seems unreasonably demanding, your first assumption should be that their behavior says more about their day, their struggles, or their circumstances than about your worthiness of respect. Customer service interactions are particularly testing because they often involve problems, frustrations, and power imbalances. You might be dealing with a company's mistake, trying to get help with a complicated issue, or seeking resolution for something that's causing you inconvenience or expense. The person helping you might have limited authority to solve your problem, be following strict scripts or policies, or be dealing with dozens of similar complaints every day. The key to successful customer service interactions is collaborative problem solving rather than adversarial demanding. Start conversations by acknowledging the other person's position. I know this probably isn't your fault, but I'm hoping you can help me figure out a solution. This approach makes the representative your partner in solving the problem rather than your opponent in a battle. When you encounter policies or responses that frustrate you, ask questions that help the representative think creatively, rather than just following standard procedures. What would you do if you were in my position? Or is there someone else who might have different options available? These questions invite them to go beyond their initial response without making them feel criticized. Social gatherings, networking events, and parties create different challenges because they involve managing multiple relationships simultaneously while often feeling pressure to be entertaining, impressive, or socially successful. You might encounter people who dominate conversations, others who seem uninterested in talking with you, or social dynamics that feel excluding or competitive. The strategy for social events is focusing on connection rather than impression management. Instead of worrying about how you're coming across or whether people are sufficiently impressed with you, focus on being genuinely interested in others and contributing positively to the social atmosphere. When you meet someone who seems disinterested or distracted, don't take it personally or try harder to win their attention. Some people are reserved and need time to warm up. Others might be dealing with social anxiety or be preoccupied with personal concerns. Give them space while remaining friendly and available. If you encounter someone who dominates conversations or seems to be showing off, resist the urge to compete or prove your own worth. Let them have the attention they seem to need while connecting with others who are more interested in mutual conversation. Often, the most socially successful people at events are those who help facilitate connections between others rather than trying to be the center of attention themselves. Dealing with strangers in public spaces requires quick assessments and flexible responses because you have no context for understanding their behavior or predicting their reactions. The person who's acting aggressively on the subway might be mentally ill, under the influence of substances, dealing with a crisis, or simply having the worst day of their life. Your primary goal in these situations is safety and de-escalation, rather than education or justice. You cannot teach strangers appropriate behavior, and attempting to do so often escalates conflicts unnecessarily. If someone is being rude or inappropriate, your best response is usually to disengage politely and create physical distance. When you witness conflicts between other people in public spaces, resist the urge to intervene unless someone is in immediate physical danger. Most public arguments are between people who know each other and have ongoing issues that you don't understand. Your intervention is unlikely to help and might make the situation worse. Online interactions present unique challenges because they lack the nonverbal cues and immediate consequences that usually regulate face-to-face social behavior. People often say things online that they would never say in person, and misunderstandings escalate quickly without the softening effects of tone of voice and body language. The principle for online emotional regulation is the same as for in-person interactions, but it requires extra discipline because the medium makes reactive responses so easy. Before responding to anything that triggers you online, implement an extended pause. Write your response, but don't send it immediately. Come back to it after some time has passed and see if you still want to communicate the same message in the same way. Remember that online interactions are often public and permanent. Responses that feel satisfying in the moment can damage your reputation and relationships long term. When someone attacks you online, consider whether a response will actually improve the situation or just provide entertainment for observers and fuel for further conflict. The Ultimate Transformation. Chapter 13. The Neuroplasticity Advantage. Rewiring your brain for permanent change. Everything you've learned so far requires consistent practice to become permanent changes in how your brain operates. Your current emotional patterns exist because they've been reinforced through repetition over months, years, or even decades. To replace them with new patterns requires understanding how your brain changes and how to accelerate that change process. Neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout your life. Every time you practice emotional regulation techniques, you're literally rewiring your brain. The neural pathways associated with reactive responses become weaker, while the pathways associated with conscious choice become stronger. This process explains why emotional control gets easier with practice, and why occasional lapses don't undo your progress. You're not just changing your behavior in the moment. You're changing the underlying brain structures that generate your emotional responses. Each time you choose pause over reaction, reframing over automatic interpretation, or detachment over emotional entanglement, you're making those choices more accessible in the future. The key factors that accelerate neuroplastic change are consistency, emotional intensity, and progressive challenge. Your brain changes faster when you practice regularly rather than sporadically, when you're emotionally engaged with the learning process rather than going through the motions, and when you challenge yourself with new situations rather than just practicing in comfortable contexts. This understanding leads to specific strategies for accelerating your emotional mastery development. First, create daily practice routines. Rather than waiting for challenging situations to test your skills, spend time each day visualizing yourself responding calmly to triggering scenarios. This mental rehearsal strengthens the neural pathways associated with regulated responses before you need them in real situations. Visualization works because your brain doesn't distinguish clearly between vividly imagined experiences and actual experiences. When you mentally rehearse staying calm during a difficult conversation with your supervisor, you're activating the same neural circuits you would use during the actual conversation. This builds strength in those pathways, making it easier to access them when you need them. Second, use emotional intensity to your advantage during practice. Don't just think about staying calm. Imagine yourself feeling genuinely peaceful and composed in difficult situations. The stronger the emotional component of your practice, the more effectively you're rewiring your brain. Create vivid mental scenarios where you can feel the satisfaction of choosing composure over reactivity. Third, progressively challenge yourself with more difficult scenarios as your skills improve. If you've mastered staying calm with mildly annoying people, intentionally practice with more challenging personalities. If you can regulate your emotions in low-stakes situations, gradually apply your skills in higher-pressure contexts. This progressive overload principle works for emotional fitness just as it does for physical fitness. The science of habit formation reveals why some people successfully change their emotional patterns while others remain stuck despite good intentions. Habits exist in neurological loops consisting of a cue, a routine, and a reward. To change emotional habits, you need to identify the cues that trigger reactive responses, develop new routines for handling those cues, and ensure that the new routines provide satisfying rewards. For example, if criticism from your team lead is a cue that triggers defensive anger, you need to recognize that cue as early as possible and replace your defensive routine with a regulated response routine. The reward needs to be something you value more than the temporary satisfaction of defending yourself, such as maintaining your professional reputation or feeling proud of your self-control. The most effective way to establish new emotional habits is through what researchers call implementation intentions. Instead of general goals like, I want to stay calm, create specific if-then plans. If my teammate interrupts me in a meeting, then I will take a deep breath and wait for them to finish before responding. These specific plans help your brain automatically choose regulated responses instead of having to make conscious decisions in triggering moments. Understanding the role of stress in neuroplasticity helps explain why emotional regulation skills seem to disappear during high-pressure periods. Chronic stress floods your brain with cortisol, which impairs the functioning of your prefrontal cortex and makes your amygdala more reactive. This means you need to manage your overall stress levels to maintain access to your emotional regulation skills. Stress management for neuroplastic optimization includes physical practices like regular movement, adequate sleep, and proper nutrition. But it also includes mental practices like meditation, mindfulness, and regular relaxation. These practices don't just feel good in the moment, they create the optimal brain conditions for continued emotional growth. The compound effect of neuroplastic change means that your efforts build on each other over time. Early progress might feel slow because you're working against well-established patterns. But as new pathways strengthen, change accelerates. People who stick with emotional regulation practice often report breakthrough moments when skills that felt forced and artificial suddenly become natural and effortless. This understanding helps you maintain motivation during the inevitable plateaus and setbacks that occur during any learning process. Temporary lapses don't mean you're not making progress. They mean you're still in the process of rewiring deeply ingrained patterns. Each time you notice a reactive response and consciously choose a regulated alternative, you're strengthening your new patterns, regardless of whether you feel like you're improving. The social dimension of neuroplasticity reveals why your relationships and environment significantly impact your emotional development. Your brain is constantly adapting to the social contexts you spend time in. If you're surrounded by highly reactive people, your brain adapts by becoming more reactive. If you spend time with emotionally regulated people, your brain adapts by developing greater regulation capacity. This means that part of your emotional mastery strategy should include consciously choosing environments and relationships that support your growth. Seek out people who model the emotional skills you want to develop. Limit time with people who consistently trigger your reactive patterns. Create physical environments that support calmness and focus rather than stress and distraction. Your brain is also shaped by the stories you tell yourself about who you are. If you consistently think of yourself as someone who gets angry easily or a naturally anxious person, you're reinforcing the neural patterns associated with those identities. If you start thinking of yourself as someone who is developing emotional mastery, or a person who chooses their responses consciously, you're reinforcing different patterns. This identity level change is powerful because it affects what you notice, what you practice, and what you consider possible for yourself. When emotional regulation becomes part of your identity rather than just a skill you're working on, the entire process becomes easier and more sustainable. Chapter 14. Living as an emotionally unshakable person. Your new reality. When you've mastered the principles and techniques in this system, you don't just handle difficult people better. You become a fundamentally different person. You develop what I call emotional unshakability, a deep inner stability that remains constant regardless of external circumstances. This isn't emotional numbness or disconnection. It's the ability to feel deeply while maintaining your center, to care without being controlled, and to engage fully with life while remaining free from the emotional chaos that dominates most people's experience. Emotionally unshakable people have certain characteristics that distinguish them from those who are still at the mercy of their reactivity. They have genuine confidence that comes from knowing they can handle whatever situations arise. This confidence isn't based on external achievements or other people's approval. It comes from proven experience managing their own emotional state under pressure. They display consistent emotional responses across different contexts. They don't have a work personality, a family personality, and a social personality that are dramatically different from each other. Their emotional regulation skills create a stable sense of self that shows up similarly in various situations and relationships. They become naturally attractive to others, not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because their emotional stability creates a sense of safety and calm that people find appealing. Others seek them out during crises, value their opinions, and enjoy spending time with them because they don't add emotional drama or reactivity to situations. The transformation to emotional unshakability happens gradually as you integrate these skills into your identity rather than just your behavior. At first, you consciously apply techniques when you remember to, and when situations seem to warrant them. You pause before reacting because you've learned that's a good strategy, not because pausing feels natural. As your practice deepens, these techniques become more automatic. You find yourself naturally taking deep breaths when you feel stressed, reframing challenging situations without conscious effort, and maintaining perspective during conflicts without having to remind yourself to do so. At the mastery level, emotional regulation becomes part of who you are rather than something you do. You don't stay calm because you're using a technique. You stay calm because emotional stability is now your natural state. You don't reframe negative situations because you've learned that's helpful. You automatically see situations from multiple perspectives because your mind has been trained to think that way. This identity level change affects every area of your life in profound ways. Your relationships improve dramatically because you're no longer contributing to emotional escalation and drama. You become a calming influence that helps others regulate their own emotions just by being present. Your professional success accelerates because you're seen as someone who can handle responsibility, pressure, and leadership challenges. You make better decisions because your thinking isn't clouded by emotional reactivity. You communicate more effectively because you're focused on understanding and problem solving rather than defending and attacking. Your physical health improves because you're no longer subjecting your body to the chronic stress hormones that come from frequent emotional activation. Your sleep improves, your digestion improves, and your immune system functions better because your nervous system spends more time in rest and restore mode rather than fight or flight mode. Your mental clarity increases because you're not wasting mental energy on rumination, resentment, and emotional processing. You have more cognitive resources available for creativity, learning, and strategic thinking because you're not constantly managing internal emotional turmoil. Perhaps most importantly, you develop a deep sense of personal freedom. You realize that no one can make you feel anything without your permission. No situation can force you into emotional reactivity unless you choose to react. No person can control your inner experience unless you give them that power. This freedom isn't loneliness or disconnection. You can still love deeply, feel passionate about causes, and experience the full range of human emotions. The difference is that you experience emotions consciously, rather than being overwhelmed by them. You choose your emotional responses, rather than having them chosen for you by circumstances and other people's behavior. Living as an emotionally unshakable person means you've become the author of your own emotional experience rather than a victim of external circumstances. You've developed the ability to maintain your inner peace regardless of the chaos around you. You've learned to respond rather than react, to choose rather than be controlled. Chapter 15, Your Path Forward, Integration and Commitment. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't mean you'll never feel angry or bothered by anyone ever again. It means that when you do experience these emotions, they don't control you. They pass through you without taking up permanent residence. They inform you without overwhelming you. They motivate you without consuming you. The journey to emotional mastery is one of the most worthwhile investments you can make in yourself because it affects every single day of your life and every relationship you have. It's a gift you give not only to yourself, but to everyone whose life you touch. When you're no longer adding reactivity and drama to the world, you become part of the solution to humanity's emotional chaos, rather than part of the problem. Let me be completely honest with you. Most people will live their entire lives at the mercy of their emotional reactions. They'll be triggered by every difficult person they encounter, stressed by circumstances they cannot control, and limited by the emotional patterns they developed in childhood. But you don't have to be most people. You now have the knowledge and techniques to become emotionally unshakable. You understand the three invisible patterns that control reactive people. You know how your brain's emergency system works and how to interrupt it. You have the pause protocol, the reframing revolution, and the detachment system. You can recognize the four personality archetypes and respond to each one strategically. You possess social intelligence, conflict transformation skills, and energy management practices. You understand neuroplasticity and how to accelerate your brain's rewiring process. The only question now is whether you'll commit to the practice required to make this transformation real. Here's what I want you to understand. This isn't about perfection. You don't need to master every technique immediately or execute them flawlessly every time. What matters is direction, not perfection. What matters is that you're moving toward emotional mastery rather than remaining stuck in reactivity. Start small. Begin with the pause protocol. Just 3 deep breaths when you notice emotional activation. Practice this one technique until it becomes automatic. Then add reframing. Then add one of the detachment principles. Build your skills gradually, layer by layer, technique by technique. Create a personal practice routine. Spend 5 minutes each morning visualizing yourself responding calmly to potential triggers you might encounter that day. Spend 5 minutes each evening reflecting on your emotional responses. What went well? What you do differently? What you learned? Track your progress. Keep a simple journal where you note situations that triggered you and how you responded. Celebrate your wins, even small ones. The first time you pause instead of reacting automatically is worth celebrating. The first time you reframe a criticism as information rather than attack is worth celebrating. Each of these moments is proof that you're changing. Find accountability and support. Share your commitment to emotional mastery with someone you trust. Ask them to check in with you regularly about your progress. Better yet, find someone who wants to develop these skills alongside you so you can support each other's growth. Be patient with yourself. Remember that you're rewiring neural pathways that have been strengthening for years or decades. Change takes time. There will be setbacks. There will be moments when you fall back into old patterns. This doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human and you're still in the process of transformation. The most important thing is to never stop practicing. Every difficult person you encounter is an opportunity to strengthen your skills. Every challenging situation is a chance to prove to yourself that you're becoming more emotionally resilient. Every moment of reactivity that you notice and learn from is a step forward on your journey. Here's what I know from working with hundreds of people who have transformed their emotional lives. The moment you truly commit to this path, everything begins to shift. Not all at once, not perfectly, but noticeably. You start to feel more in control of your inner experience. You start to notice that situations that used to derail you for hours now barely register. You start to become the person others turn to when they need calm wisdom in the midst of chaos. And one day, you'll realize something profound. You've gone an entire week without getting truly angry at anyone, or a difficult family member pushed your old buttons and you didn't react the way you used to, or a challenging situation at work unfolded and you handled it with a composure that surprised even you. These moments are when you'll know the transformation is real. Your future self is waiting for you to make this choice. The person you can become, the emotionally unshakable, deeply centered, genuinely free version of yourself, already exists as a possibility. The only thing standing between who you are now and who you can become is consistent practice of these principles. The choice is yours, and it's available to you right now, in this moment. You can continue being bothered by difficult people, or you can become someone who is never bothered by anyone. You can remain reactive, or you can become responsive. You can stay emotionally dependent, or you can become emotionally free. I'm not going to tell you it's easy. I'm telling you it's worth it. I'm telling you it's possible. And I'm telling you that every single person who has committed to this path and practiced these principles consistently has experienced transformation. The question isn't whether you can do this. The question is whether you will do this, whether you'll take what you've learned and actually apply it, whether you'll practice when it's difficult, continue when you're frustrated, and persist when you don't see immediate results. Because here's the truth. 6 months from now, you're going to arrive at that future date regardless. The only question is who you'll be when you get there. Will you be the same person, still triggered by the same people, still controlled by the same patterns? Or will you be someone fundamentally different, someone who has developed genuine emotional mastery? The transformation starts now. Not tomorrow, not after you finish reading, not when circumstances are more favorable. Right now, in this moment, you can make the decision that changes everything. Decide that you're done being controlled by other people's behavior. Decide that you're ready to take full ownership of your emotional experience. Decide that you're committed to becoming emotionally unshakable, no matter how long it takes or how much practice it requires, and then take the first step. Just one step. Implement the pause protocol the next time you feel triggered. Reframe one negative interpretation. Practice one technique from this entire system. That single step is all you need to begin. From there, take another step, and another, and another. Each step strengthens your new neural pathways. Each practice session builds your emotional resilience. Each situation you handle with composure proves to yourself that you're capable of this transformation. You have everything you need. You have the knowledge, the techniques, the understanding of how your brain works and how to change it. The only ingredient left is your commitment, your willingness to practice, to persist, to become the emotionally unshakable person you're capable of being. So I'm asking you now, are you ready? Are you ready to never be controlled by difficult people again? Are you ready to maintain your peace regardless of external chaos? Are you ready to live with genuine emotional freedom? If your answer is yes, then begin. Begin now. Begin today. Begin with the very next interaction you have. And never stop beginning. Never stop practicing. Never stop growing. Your emotionally unshakable future is waiting. Go claim it.